Good morning, Wooden. I am so glad to see you guys today. I hope you're having a spectacular week. Well, today we are going to talk about study skills, how to be successful in middle school. I don't know how you guys are feeling about the school year so far, if you feel like it's harder than last year, easier than last year. I don't know. But study skills are something that are super important for you to kind of learn and put into regular practice in middle school so that you know exactly what works for you before you get into high school and if you choose to go to college. So I'm going to do this little kind of um, quiz kind of thing with you. So if what I say is a win and something that you should do, then I want you to say W. And if it's something that's not good and probably won't help, an L for that's a loss. Okay. So I studied for 5 hours without taking a break. That would be an L. That's not good. I made practice questions. W. That's a win. I waited until 10 p.m. the night before to study. Lose. I explained the lesson and taught the lesson to my dog. Actually, that's a win. Maybe that may sound weird, but it is a win. I checked my phone every 3 minutes while I was studying. Oh. I studied for 15 minutes and took a short break and studied for 15 more minutes and took another short break. That is a win. So, right there are some things that kind of clue you into some good study skills. But let's talk about one real fast. One is setting a timer. Well, let's back up. One, we need to find a quiet place in our house to be able to focus and stay focused. Two, you need to have completed all of your work for whatever class you're going to be studying for, because you're going to be missing a lot of information if you have not completed all of your work. So get on Skyward, see if you have missing work. And if you do, let's get that done so you can then study for whatever test or quiz that you have coming up. Then, once you're in your quiet place, set a timer for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and pull out all the worksheets or pull up on your Google Classroom all the work that you guys have done in that class up to that point or over the material that the test is going to be over, and read through it. When I was in school, sometimes I had to read things out loud to myself when I was studied for me to, one, stay focused, and two, to retain the information. So figure out kind of what works for you. Reading through the information at least once, reading it out loud a second time, and then reading it through one more time. And then once your timer goes off, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, take a little bit of a break, then come back, set the timer again for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, review that information one more time, take a break, and then come back for 5 or 10 minutes and maybe study a different subject for a different class or something. Um, so we want to study one small topic at a time, take short breaks, and repeat that as we need to be able to retain the information. Another thing is we can't just read the information. We actually have to do something with it. That means it's super helpful to read the information, but it might be helpful to make flashcards, to make your own quiz about the information and take your own quiz. Use Quizlet if possible. Um, in one of the little scenario questions that I had, I mentioned explaining or teaching something to your dog. So that is some different way that people retain information is by explaining it or teaching it to someone else, a parent, a sibling, your cat, your dog, whoever, but teaching or explaining it to someone can be really helpful. Also, writing down things to help you remember, writing out your notes or maybe your key words as you read through the papers that you've completed up to this point, and checking your notes, making your own practice questions. That could be another way to study. So if your brain is doing something with the information that the class is about, then that is studying, a form of studying. Another good thing to do is to kind of do a brain dump. So a couple of days before a test, let's say 3 days before taking a test, just sit and write out all that you remember about the information. And then go back and compare that to maybe to some of your worksheets that you've done and see what you might be missing. Whatever you're missing are probably the things you need to focus on kind of reviewing for the next couple of days before the test. I just think that taking the time to do something like this, making flashcards, reviewing your notes, reviewing worksheets, or whatever's on Google Classroom, a week before a test for a couple of days actually will help you feel better once you get to the test. Now, how many of you guys experience test anxiety? I did when I was in school. So let's talk about some different ways to manage test anxiety. One, I think, is when you sit down to take, one is not just when you sit down to take the test, but in the week leading up to the test, making sure you're doing your part to review and know the information to the best of your ability. Then when you sit down to take the test, before you start doing anything on the test, just taking a short, simple, deep breath in and out, allowing yourself to kind of relax. That just kind of relaxes your whole body. We're not trying to make the anxiety disappear, like I've said before. We're just trying to manage it so that we can focus and concentrate. And that deep breath in and out is reminding our body that we're okay and that we've got this. So when we are anxious about a test, we have a lot of thoughts going through our head. So one of the thoughts might be, I'm going to fail this test. It's super important to challenge those kind of thoughts because those usually are kind of extreme thoughts. So if we're thinking, I'm going to fail this test, it's important to remind ourselves, hey, I've studied for this. I've reviewed the information. I'm just going to take one question at a time. I'm just focusing on the first question and I'll go from there. If it's, oh my gosh, I don't remember anything. I studied and my brain just went blank. Trust me, remind yourself that you know more than you think you do. If it's, everyone's going to finish the test before me, it's reminding ourselves all I have to worry about is my test, not anybody else's test. And maybe they didn't study. Maybe they just went through and answered crazy stuff, you know? Maybe you're thinking, I have to get every question right. Well, I think we challenge that by just saying, I'm going to do the best that I can. And one thing that we can do as we go through a test is if we answer a question on a test and we're not quite sure, you can just put a mark next to that question so that when you're done with your test, you can go back to those questions and kind of see if you want to change your answer or not. I always say, go with your gut. Whatever your first answer is might be the best one. Another thing to kind of have a test day game plan. One is if you hit a hard question, don't panic, just stop, take your deep breath, read the question carefully, and then answer it to the best of your ability. Answer what you know and come back to those difficult questions later. And also, I think it's super important to remind yourself of all the successes that you've had on tests prior to this test that you're taking right now. So these are some study skills. Your teachers probably have some really great ideas for other study skills or ways to study. Um, I think also it's helpful to ask your teachers, your math teacher, your ELA teacher, your social studies teacher, science teacher, to ask them, what's the best way for me to study for your tests? And they will give you some great ideas. So I want you guys to sit and take some time to talk about, do you struggle with test anxiety? How do others handle that when they get really anxious about a test? And to talk about what are some specific study skills that you have found that have been really helpful for you to be successful in school. I hope you guys have a great day. If you need anything, feel free to find me. Bye.